Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time you might be joining us today, we're so happy you're here. Although we can't spend time with you in person this year at ALA, it gives us great joy to know that we can continue to connect and recharge about books with such passionate and caring librarians. My name is Lizette Serrano, and I have the honor of hosting our event today and introducing our masterful storytellers and their work. Aida Salazar has become one of the most important new voices in children's literature with her debut novel, The Moon Within. It captured the hearts of readers and earned 3-star reviews and multiple awards. With the cultural and historic exploration of Chicano people, she now brings her thoughtful and lyrical craft to another relevant topic, immigration. A powerful and timely story written in verse, Land of the Cranes brings humanity to a political issue, told through the eyes of a young Latinx girl. This essential novel will reach readers' hearts and minds and expand the capacity for empathy, love, and the need for justice. Another great poet, Anne Burg's verse novels All the Broken Pieces, Seraphina's Promise, and Unbound carry highly charged emotions with elegant simplicity and has been celebrated with a number of accolades and awards. Her new novel, Flooded, Anne applies her distinctive voice to create a technical feat of storytelling. Told through the voices of 6 different children, all inspired by real people, tells the story of Johnston, Pennsylvania, and devastation they faced in 1889. The search for justice, environmental themes, and the way the wealthy escape retribution will strike true for today's readers and also give them a sense of hope and empowerment. Interesting fact, in coincident numbers from Overdrive, young adult nonfiction reading is up 165% since March. Here to answer the call is YALSA nonfiction award-winning author Neal Bascomb, who is back to bring us another stellar nonfiction standout. The Racers, How an Outcast Driver, an American Harris, and a legendary car challenge Hitler, brings us a story about an unlikely band of ragtags who took on Hitler's top Grand Prix drivers in 1937. This richly cinematic story about marginalized figures such as women and Jews presents a unique and fresh angle on the World War II era. And the power of teamwork and perseverance in the face of evil will leave your heart racing and uplifted by its end. Kelly Yang channeled her experience as a child immigrant in the US in her touching debut novel, Front Desk. We are forever grateful as the countless of teachers and librarians who continue to champion this book to their readers. Among others, Front Desk won the 2019 Asian Pacific America Award. 6th grader Mia Tang is a force of nature as she confronts injustice in this thrilling and powerful sequel. The storyline expertly weaves together the progress and setback Mia experiences as her family continues to work seamlessly on the edge of poverty. Don't miss this brave hero. She confronts anti-immigrant hatred in this timely historical novel. Bill Konigsberg is another masterful storyteller who weaves his personal experiences brilliantly to the page for teens today. He is the author of 6 books, including the Stonewall Book Award winner, The Porcupine of Truth. With his next breakout novel, The Bridge, he brings the story of 2 teenagers, strangers to each other, who had decided to jump from the same bridge at the same time. But what results is far from straightforward. Bill tells the story of 4 different outcomes, giving dimensions to his character struggles. The Bridge is astonishing, an honest lifesaver which addresses issues of depression, loneliness, and self-worth infused with Bill's signature warmth. This is the essential book everyone needs to read.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, ALA. Thank you, Scholastic, for giving me this opportunity to connect with you, the librarians and educators, around my second novel, Land of the Cranes. This is Land of the Cranes. Land of the Cranes tells the story of 9-year-old Betita, who believes that she and other migrants follow an Aztec prophecy to fly as free as cranes. So when her father is deported to Mexico and she and her mother are detained by ICE, she turns to writing picture poems as her way to fly above the deplorable conditions that she and other cranes experience while they're caged. While this is a work of fiction, much of what is shared is based on the experiences of real migrant children and their families. Her story is one that can be folded into a larger tragic story, a true story of the criminalization of migration that spans hundreds of years in the United States. The history of humanity across the globe is one of migration. The Americas were populated this way. We know of Aztlán, one of the homelands of the Mexica people, the place Betita's father references in the myth inside the book, because of the migrant story through the Codex Buturini, one of the few remaining books of pre-colonial Mesoamerica. On the surface, the reasons why people migrate are too vastly different to see any commonality. However, when we look closely, the need to migrate is very similar in both the human and the animal worlds. If we look at migration patterns, not only of people, but of cranes and other species, we will notice what all migrants have in common, that they migrate to survive changes to their environment and for their well-being. It is humans who have drawn the lines in the sand, erected walls and borders around their territories, and deemed people illegal when they cross those walls and borders. The Trump administration's zero tolerance policy saw thousands of migrant children, mostly Central Americans, separated from their parents and kept in cages and treated inhumanely. This policy also brought about an increase in the already shocking number of migrants who died trying to cross the US-Mexico border or while in custody. Despite worldwide protest over the clear violations of human rights, this administration continues to hurt asylum-seeking children and families as its laws change for the worse each day to our continued horror. There's no compassion when migrants arrive, nor is there any understanding of the reasons people are forced to flee their homelands with their children. I'm heartbroken and appalled, not only by the Trump administration or previous administrations, but also by everyday citizens who support the message of hate and towards migrants. Their views and their entitled claims to land and territory really disregard the First Nations of the United States, hundreds of years of migration, and really the human suffering at the very root of why people migrate. I wrote Land of the Cranes with an understanding of the long and devastating history of raids, separations, deportations, incarcerations, and deaths my community has suffered, but also from an intimate place. I, like Betita, was an undocumented child. I was born in Mexico and I was brought to the United States as a baby. My fear of la migra, which is immigration enforcement, and how they could easily rip our family apart hung over me until we received our green cards, though this was not necessarily a guarantee of safety. The immigrant community in which Betita was raised in East LA and the fears, stigmas, and prejudices her community faced are mine too. Though I was never detained or deported for being a migrant, some in my family and many in my community have been. This is a story that I had to tell for us. This is not the only story, however. This book is part of a wider literary tradition by numerous authors who have been speaking to the wound of migration for many years. I chose to name some of the characters in the book after children who died while in detention or while migrating. I did so with the utmost respect and love, and also in order to honor their memory and add resonance to their lives, even if only within the pages of this book. I'm so hopeful that more own voices stories from the Central American perspective will rise to speak to the deep tragedies and suffering these communities have endured. Their stories need to be told by them, especially because Central Americans, many of whom are indigenous, make up the largest group of migrants coming to the border today. While these injustices may seem impossible to challenge, the crisis requires we break open our own humanity to try and find positive solutions steeped in respect for migrants and for their heartbreaking circumstances. This cannot be achieved by building more walls nor by acting with cruelty. I believe in our collective loving spirit, and in this book, this long picture poem is my offering of esperanza, hope. I hope that readers like Betita will search to find light in their darkest hour, or as her papi says, find sweetness in your struggle. I hope that they know that they have the power to write, to draw, to speak up against and shut down the forces that seek to make migrants criminals. I hope that our wings, our voices, will help us, members of the human family, rise above the hate and carry the much needed compassion and justice for migrants into a vast migration of change across the globe. All of us with love, flying together. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ann Burg, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity to talk to you about my upcoming verse novel, Flooded, Requiem for Johnstown. Flooded started out as a lesson plan for a group of college students, but what started as preparations for a workshop turned into years of intense, heartbreaking research. On May 31st, 1889, the South Fork Dam, 14 miles above the industrial community of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, collapsed. 20 million tons of water hurtled toward the valley below. More than 2,000 people died, including 99 entire families and 396 children. The Johnstown flood of 1889 was the largest civilian disaster on American soil until September 11, 2001. I was surprised at how little I knew about the flood and resolved to learn more. My research included a history of the South Fork Dam, as well as portraits of Andrew Carnegie, Henry Frick, and other movers and shakers of the 19th century. As I researched, I recognized a number of issues we still grapple with today: appreciation of nature by some and an exploitation of nature by others, rigid class distinctions, the perpetual lure of wealth, and a dismissive attitude towards immigrants and those still struggling for the American dream. I met good people, heroes, champions for justice too. Times change, but human nature not so much. Still, what haunted me most were the morgue entries, hundreds of descriptions copied from whatever scraps of paper could have been found after the flood. In addition to the identified mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers, there were so many unidentified. Unknown female, about 13, black stockings with red tips. Unknown male, about 11, black hair, short black pants. Unknown male, burned beyond recognition. Who were these people? What were their dreams, their hopes? Based on newspaper articles and firsthand accounts, and told through the voices of those who lived there, Flooded, Requiem for Johnstown is the story of a 19th century industrial town. It's the story of indifference and greed, but it's also the story of small, everyday dreams and our resilience in the face of disaster. In the following excerpt, which I'm going to read, George, one of my main characters, has gone to help his neighbor move some furniture in preparation for the annual springtime floods. We carry a table to the attic and move a heavy cushioned couch to where the table used to be. It's not the seasonal floods that worry me, Mr. Ryan says. It's that dam. That dam's weak. One of those days that dam's going to burst. James Quinn, you know Quinn, he owns the dry goods store on Clinton. Well, Quinn says that dam burst won't matter where we move this couch. Ever see that big, beautiful lake in the mountain? No, sir, I lie. Any idea how much water's in that lake? No, sir. Tons, millions of tons. Ever see the South Fork Dam? Know what the breaches are stuffed with? No, sir, I don't. Hemlock and hay, stumps and straw, mud and manure. Mr. Ryan wipes his forehead with the back of his hand. That dam's one sagging slop. It ever gives way, Johnstown will be wiped off the map. Yes, sir. Mr. Ryan nods for me to sit while he carries a rocking chair to a far corner of the room. He's still talking. They've been warned, Carnegie and his cohorts, Frick, Mellon, Elder, all those fancy members of the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club. They've been warned for years. They just don't care. Mark my words, their self-serving folly will destroy Johnstown. He nods me up and I help him roll the rug beneath my feet and carry it upstairs. Every spring, old-timers worry about the dam. and every spring the dam holds. Still I take a deep breath and shake off the swarm of mayflies flittering in my gut. What if this spring is different? Flooded, Requiem for Johnstown offers an answer to George's question, what if? Thank you for listening.
Welcome, educators and librarians. Neal Bascomb here, author of my latest, The Racers. Now, I'm often asked at bookstore events and speeches, like, where do I come up with all my ideas? And they come from a range of places. My book, Nazi Hunters, came through a friendship with a Holocaust survivor. Sabotage came through this little vignette and this huge doorstopper of a book. My book, The Grand Escape, came from my editor actually at Scholastic, who suggested I write a great escape story. This new book, The Racers, came from a serendipitous tip from a friend of mine out in California who had gone to see a car show. And I wasn't really even a car guy, but he came back and said, I heard this story about this car that presented here, the Delahaye 145. And it had this just remarkable backstory, and he proceeded to tell me a bit about it. In 1940, when the Nazis invaded France and made their way down to Paris, they had a lot on their minds, of course, occupying the country. But a few SS had a particular mission in mind. That was to find the 4 Grand Prix cars, the Delahaye 145s that had ever been built, find them and have them destroyed. The owners of them, the drivers and Lucy Schell, who had them built, hid 2 in Paris, had them disassembled and hidden amidst the shop, and had 2 others hidden in caves in northern France. The Germans, the SS, went to the Automobile Club of France. They had all the records of the victories of the Delahaye taken, and all the records of any French victory stolen from the club, brought back to Germany, and have never been found again. And so they largely wanted to erase this history, and I was fascinated about what was it about these cars, what was it that they did that was so incredible, and the people behind them. That's the story I tell in The Racers. And at the onset, when I was doing the research, I have to be honest, I ran into brick wall and brick wall. Renee did not have any children. Lucy Schell, the heiress who funded their being built, had children, but they left nothing behind. The Delahaye company had long since gone bankrupt. And I really thought there was this void. I wouldn't be able to tell this story in the visceral way that I like to. And then I got this package in the mail. It was about 500 pages of newspaper articles, of profiles, of letters, of interviews, and also all the way down to the speeches given at the funeral of Rene Dreyfus. And it came from his niece who had collected these and then somehow found out that I was looking around about her uncle, and she sent them out of the blue. And that really got me started on this incredible tale. Now I'll start with who Rene Dreyfus was. The best quote I probably have about him was, he had a stare of a searing intensity and undying affection that lets you know without a doubt that Rene was put on this earth to drive fast. Now, Rene broke into the scene. He was a French driver in 1930, won the Grand Prix at Monaco, and became one of the top drivers. He was on Maserati, Alfa Romeo, Bugatti, all the best. He was one of the top-ranked, 10 best-ranked drivers. By 1936, though, he was banned from every team, the Italians, the Germans, the best cars, because of his Jewish heritage. And he was at a loss by 1936. In steps Lucy Schell. Lucy Schell was an American heiress. She was actually born in Paris. Her father was an American multimillionaire. Her mother was French. She bounced back and forth between the two countries. She was just an absolute dynamo. She could have just sort of whiled her life away in luxury, but in World War I, she volunteered to be a nurse in the Paris hospitals, saw some gruesome horrors there, and was left with this sort of bitterness towards the Germans. During the 1920s, the movable feast of Paris, she sort of dove into that scene. And she also dove into the racing scene and became one of the earliest speed queens. She became the top-ranked American Monte Carlo rally driver, rallies that go on days over thousands of miles. A journalist who once rode in the back of her car said the icier that the roads got, the more dangerous things became, the bigger the smile Lucy had on her face. She would drive with broken arms, and she would just win and win and win. In 1936, she decided to, hang up her overalls, be done with racing, but she decided to start her own Grand Prix racing team. She wanted to take on the Germans. Now, what had happened in the mid-30s is that Hitler came in and decided if he could dominate motorsport, it would be a propaganda bonanza, and it would help recruit the young to learn how to drive and to manage cars, all looking his eye towards the motorized infantry. And so he poured money into Mercedes-Benz and Auto Union, and they just absolutely dominated with the most technologically advanced cars. They were called the Silver Arrows, and for 4 years running, they just cleaned every circuit, winning over and over and over. And so Lucy decides to take them on. She recruits Renee to her team. She taps the Delahaye Automobile Company to build her cars, even though they had never built race cars before. And they begin the journey, as told in The Racers, to claim victory, symbolic, over the Germans. Ultimately, the cars, the Delahaye 145s, were discovered again after the war, and I actually got to drive in one of them and barrel through the countryside of these orange groves in California and give readers, hopefully, the visceral feel of what it was like to drive in these pre-war race cars that are just absolutely terrifying, but fascinating. And I hope I bring that to readers, as well as how important this story was right before World War II. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Yang, and I'm the author of Front Desk. And I'm here to talk about Three Keys, which is the sequel to Front Desk. Mia Tain, if you guys remember, returns in this book. She's a first-generation immigrant girl from China, and she returns to battle racism in this really, really riveting sequel to Front Desk. And at this point, she's now an owner of the Cala Vista Motel, which she now owns with her parents, with her best friend Lupe, and with a bunch of other weeklies and immigrants. It's an election year in California, and there's a governor's race that's getting super heated. One of the new laws that's on the ballot is something called Proposition 187, and it's going to kick out all the undocumented kids, all the undocumented immigrant children from California schools. It's going to ban them from accessing health care. Right? So as we get closer and closer to the election, the acts of hate crime, of racism, skyrocket all over California. And this is real. This really happened. It skyrocketed all over Los Angeles, including at the Cala Vista Motel. And it's going to take all of Mia's bravery, her resilience, and her voice to stand up to this. And when her best friend Lupe reveals that she's actually an undocumented immigrant, Mia learns to be an ally. She learns to be a true friend. And the girls have to work hard together to help change voters' minds and to save Lupe's dad, Jose, who gets picked up by the police and put in immigration jail awaiting deportation proceedings. Now, I remember growing up. I grew up in California, and I remember growing up as an immigrant child. And I remember going through Proposition 187. I was about 10 years old at the time. And I remember watching the racist acts in horror, just so many hate crimes skyrocketing all over where we lived in Southern California. Watching the advertisements on TV, the advertisements put out by our governor, Governor Pete Wilson, advertisements making immigrants look like just unbelievable advertisements all over our television, all over our newspapers. And so many of us immigrant children huddled in our classrooms, while the other kids openly speculated about our immigration statuses. And there was a boy in my hometown of Anaheim, Julio, who died because his parents were afraid to take him to the hospital. And he was only 2 years older than me. So I'll never forget the impact of this election, the anger. There was this explosive anger that was directed at immigrants everywhere. It didn't matter if you were documented or if you were undocumented. And the fact that it passed, this law passed in California 60-40. That many people voted to deny innocent immigrant children the right to go to school. And that many people voted to deny them the right to go to the hospital, even when they were dying. And I carried these memories with me for many, many, many years, knowing that one day I would want to write about it. I would have to write about it. And I finally have in Three Keys. Three Keys is an extremely timely and important book. It explains racism and where it comes from historically, and most importantly, what we can all do to stop it. It empowers kids to speak up, to stand up to racism. We don't have to take this. We can bond together. We can come together as a community, united in love and humanity, in the things that we have in common as a human species. That's what's going to get us through our current crisis. At the same time, Three Keys is a warm and funny and extremely accessible book about friendship. Mia has never had a best friend before because she's moved around so much as an immigrant. Her parents would always get a job one year and then have to, leave because they got fired. So she was constantly moving and moving and moving. Finally, she gets to settle down and make a best friend in Lupe. And she also makes a best friend in Jason, believe it or not. And Jason, as we all know from book one, wasn't always very nice to her. But in book two, they really start becoming friends. And we're going to see a very interesting side to Jason. Still, though, the memories of Jason being mean to Mia, it's going to make it challenging for her to learn to be a friend to him. And she has to learn the three keys of friendship. It's a story about the American dream. Who does that belong to? What does it even mean to be an American? What does it mean to be Chinese? And can you be both? Okay, it's also a fast-paced book. It's a page turner. It's extremely suspenseful. You really get a feel as to what's at stake, and it's going to excite kids and galvanize kids to understand elections and why they matter and why they're so important. It's going to energize kids to make a difference from a very young age. It's a sequel that I believe truly lives up to the first book. I have traveled the nation, and I have seen the impact of Front Desk. I've had so many kids come up to me and tell me, Kelly, thank you for Front Desk because I've never seen myself represented in a book before. I've had kids put little notes in my pocket saying, your book inspired me to tell my friend that my parents work in a restaurant. This little girl had never told her friends at school before because she always felt ashamed. And because of Front Desk, so many kids see themselves. They really see themselves in Mia's struggle. And so I really took all that. Those kids really spoke to me, and I'm so proud to be able to give them Three Keys. It's a book that I think kids are going to love and they're going to hug for years and years and years. And I can't wait to share it with you guys. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Bill Konigsberg, and I'm the author of The Bridge, which is coming out from Scholastic this September 1st. So The Bridge is the story of two teens, both 17, a boy and a girl, who meet atop the George Washington Bridge in New York City. They don't know each other. They're both there to jump, and they interrupt each other. And based on what happens the moment that the two of them are sitting 100 feet apart, one leg over the railing each, the world splits into 4 different realities. In the first reality, the girl jumps and the boy doesn't. And the story is about the aftermath for the boy who has not jumped and what happens to him, and also the aftermath for the girl's family. When that story ends, we go right back to that moment. And in the second story, the boy jumps and the girl doesn't. And we see the aftermath of the boy's death on his family, who we now know very well, and we learn more about the girl. In the third story, they both jump, and the book goes far into the future to show the impact of their absence on many people we haven't even met before. And the fourth book, they both decide not to jump, and a connection is forged between these two characters that changes their lives forever. So I wrote this book in response to a lie my brain told me when I was suicidally depressed. And that lie was that the world wouldn't care if I were gone. And I know that other people who have struggled with depression have also had, or suicidal ideation, have also had that thought. And depression, it makes our brains lie to us. And along with being untrue, it's a very dangerous lie. So what I really wanted to do was show how radically different the world would be in each of these 4 outcomes, so that, maybe one day a depressed teenager might have the thought, like I said, and remember that it's not true, that the world would be different without them, because that is true for every human being. So this was a really, really, really hard book to write, as you can imagine. I am somebody who has dealt with chronic depression, and I did actually attempt suicide in my 20s. So this issue and these characters are very personal to me. In order to write the book, I really had to focus in on self-care because I had to go deep into these feelings, which is hard to do because, of course, those were the very feelings that I nearly ended my life not to feel. So I had to be very careful to make sure that I had resources available to me while I was writing and people to talk to, so that if I fell down into that abyss and I needed to come up for air, I would know that there was a plan and there were people to talk to support me, because we all need people. And really that's one of the messages of the book, how important it is to connect to others, even when we're depressed and we do not want to. And of course, I did also take care to write, to include many resources at the end of the book, because I believe it's a subject that will hit home for a lot of readers. So I would like to share with you a quick session of this book. And this is from the point of, this is about Aaron. So Aaron is the 17-year-old boy, and he shares a lot in common with me. From my childhood. He really struggles with feeling unwanted, unloved, unlovable. And this is from when he was 8 and his mother told him that she was moving out. "Sometimes you change things up," she said. "Something's got to give. When you're older, you'll understand." And Aaron nodded, and she told him he was such a good kid, and he knew that he was. But he wondered, would he one day understand? Because he fundamentally didn't, but he knew better than to ask. 9 years later, he doesn't really understand. Or he does, kind of. You see, there are levels of shininess in this world. There's glitter, like the kind that shocks your eyes when you glance at it, and it's like looking into a million pieces of the sun glimmering. There's the shininess of a chocolate cake in a patisserie window, the chocolate frosting seemingly lacquered on, and you think it's almost too shiny to eat, but boy, would you like to. There's normal shiny, like people in Central Park, and depending on the angle of the sun, there might be a glint off a forehead or there might not be. There might be shade and shadow showing their fundamental unworthiness. And then there's dull. The things, the people upon whom the sun never shines. The invisible, really. His mom loves shiny things. The world does. He is invisible. He will become shiny if it kills him. Yeah, so taking a second because that's hard for me to read, actually. I hope that you enjoyed that, though. I am excited to be published by Scholastic, which has really become a home to me. The company always seems to truly care about the content of my books and getting the message and the story out there. And that includes the incredible sales reps who have been so encouraging of this project in particular. And in the end, this is, for all the aspects that are difficult in the story, ultimately, this is a story of hope. My hope is that the book becomes a companion for anyone who is struggling so that they don't feel alone, because it's my belief that we are truly never alone. Any feeling that a teenager is having has been felt before, and it is crucial that they not only see their struggle, but see the eventual story in which both teams decide to stay another day. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you'll check out The Bridge when it comes out in September.
Wow. Thank you so much, Bill, Kelly, Neal, Aida, and Anne. That was truly powerful. Definitely was a balm to my soul today to hear all your amazing stories. I think the greatest gift we can give each other for self-care are books, and your books certainly provide that. Entertainment, comfort, healing, and so much more. So thank you. So I wanted to pose a question to all of you today to answer. which would be interesting if I asked you this 3 months ago, 4 months ago, or the beginning of writing of each of your books. But if you each can answer this question is, why was it so important to write this book and now?
It's a great question. And I was reading an editorial this morning, actually, that talked about how leadership does not necessarily come from the top. Often it comes from the community, the people next door, the people in your workplace, in your school. And the story of the racers, although it's, I hope it's lightning fast and exciting for young readers, I hope they get the message that I was trying to impart in it, which is Lucy Schell and Renee Dreyfuss, they were in the racing world. They weren't involved in politics. And to be perfectly honest, they didn't want to be. They didn't want to interfere. They wanted to stay within their lane and keep going. But at a certain point, Lucy Schell decided that she wanted to stand up and against the horrors that she was seeing in Nazi Germany. And so she did so in the arena in which she lived. She did in the auto racing world. She decided that she wanted to prove that the Germans were not invincible. And that was something that Renee didn't really want to get involved in, but she eventually brought him forward to that. And so it's really about these individuals standing up, leading from the place where they can. They couldn't be national figures changing the political scene, but they could take the fight in the world in which they lived. And I hope that's what readers and everyone takes away from the racers.
I think there's a lot of reasons Flooded will resonate with readers today. One moment, kids in Johnstown are enjoying the Decoration Day parade, and the next, they're looking out on their ruined city. One moment, we're expecting school or work on Monday, maybe looking forward to a conference in June. And the next, we are as we are now, isolated, separated from our friends, looking out on a world transformed. Like the characters in Flooded, we've been forced to rethink our expectations in a changed world.
Sometimes life imitates art because, as it turns out, this book is coming out exactly when it's most needed. I mean, the pandemic is creating a mental health crisis around the world. And actually, about 3 months into the pandemic, I personally started to sink into a deep depression. It had been a really long time since that had happened to me, and it knocked me down and it knocked me out for quite a while. And it frightened me. And there it was, The Bridge, the book that I had written, hoping to reach people who were struggling with the lies that the brain sometimes tells when it's depressed. And I read the book while depressed, and it did, in fact, help me see through, it helped me feel less alone, and it helped me see through that lie that this one was different, this one was worse, this might be the worst one. And it connected me to those feelings that I felt before. And I suppose I hope that this book will keep many others company as they struggle through dark times, and that it will help them fight their way through.
That is such a powerful question to ask. Right now, we are still caging children along the US-Mexico border. Right now, we are experiencing Black and brown bodies being completely violated across the United States with violence. And this story is important so that children can not only see, themselves as victims or their communities as victims of these immense, acts of violence, but to see how through art in particular they can push back. They can shut down. They can take their own agency and use it as a force of goodness in the world. And so now more than ever do we need to teach our children these tools. They need to know that they have power. And what, as children's book authors, what other thing can we offer? What other more revolutionary way of inspiring change can we offer but this way?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Just so inspired listening to all of you, first of all. Just so grateful to be part of this conversation in this family. But yeah, I mean, I wrote 3 Keys because it was a huge part of my childhood. But there's so many lessons for our current time. You know, we're going through this phase now where it's almost okay to be racist, according to our president. You know, we have these words thrown at us every day. I was personally called a Chinese virus. I was walking my dog in the park, and then I was told to go back to where I came from, right here in the Bay Area. You know, so when I experience a lot of these things, the first thing people say to me is, how can that happen in the progressive Bay Area? That doesn't happen. How can that happen? And I immediately think, you know what, you guys? Of course this can happen because it has happened historically. And we need to teach kids about racism earlier on so they have, like Aida was saying, the tools to understand, to cope, to change things. You know, we need to give them that hope. We need to give them the hope that they can affect change. And this is what 3 Keys is all about. It's one little girl, right? One little girl, through the power of her pen and through the power of her friends, she lifts things for her entire community. So yes, we absolutely need books to help us understand the lessons for our current times, but to also do something about it. Even though it is so hard, and sometimes you look out in the world and it feels hopeless. It almost feels like it's such an uphill battle. How can we possibly do anything about it when we're being crushed with all of these acts of racism and all these acts of hostility in every direction, literally in our own neighborhoods, everywhere you go? Well, we absolutely can, because historically we've done it. And we need those examples and we need those stories to make sure that we keep going and that we give our kids all of those tools to make sure that our future tomorrow is brighter than our today. Thank you.
I definitely feel a lot of hope. I feel uplifted. I feel even, you know, these books and your words and what you have all shared today is a great call to action, and how we can do it through our words, through art, through books. So I'm very grateful for each of you for doing that and being here with us today. And we're also deeply appreciative of librarians and educators around the world who are doing tireless work to reach readers and their communities and families and caregivers. So thank you for being here today. I hope these books provide you the strength and tools you need to keep going as we're all in this together. Thank you for being here today, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.